Hey guys, welcome to Journey of Relaxation. Tonight, we're stepping barefoot into the soft amber dust of old Timbuktu, just as the heat of the day begins to sigh into something gentler. A faint smell of dried dates, leather parchment, and wood smoke lingers on the breeze. You walk slowly, everyone does here. The sun has scorched the sand into memory foam, and even the camels look contemplative. You pass under a crumbling archway where shadows gather like patient listeners. Traders crouch behind low wooden stalls, their goods laid out in neat, colorful patterns, tufts of indigo cloth, chunks of rock salt, delicate beads, and those unmistakable brass weights. A soft murmur rises from the market, not the chaotic buzz you might expect, but something closer to a hum. No shouting, no rush, just rhythmic greetings, long silences, and the creak of woven baskets. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And tell me in the comments, where are you watching from, and what time is it for you right now? Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You pause in front of a merchant who's cradling a small scale, the kind that looks like it could double as a childhood toy. He places a tiny gold nugget on one end and reaches into a cloth pouch to pull out an intricate little figurine. Maybe a crocodile, maybe a drum. It's hard to tell because the metal is worn smooth with years of use. He balances it delicately on the other side of the scale. The two ends don't quite align. He nudges the gold, adds a bead-sized counterweight, weight size. Still not right. But there's no rush. This is the first transaction of the day, and it might take all morning. In this world, the act of trading isn't about winning. It's about equilibrium, literal and social. You don't just exchange goods, you perform a ritual of respect. No loud bargaining, no dramatic arm waving. If you speak too quickly, you're suspicious. If you smile too eagerly, people wonder what you're hiding. Calm is currency here. Historians still argue whether this emphasis on slow, polite negotiation came from Islamic legal traditions or pre-Islamic West African customs. Either way, you feel it. Every deal is a kind of song, softly sung, repeated and revised until both sides know all the verses. Just ahead, a pair of young traders sit cross-legged, sipping bissap tea and debating the price of cola nuts. One leans back, taps his chin with a twig, and offers his counter-proposal not with words, but by rearranging his goods into a subtle new pattern. The other watches, nods, then carefully moves a single nut forward. It's like chess, but played on woven mats with spices. You hear a griot not singing today, but murmuring into the ear of a customer. He's reciting the lineage of a family of salt traders, tracing every generation back to a sand-blown ancestor who once exchanged a single gold coin for a white horse with blue beads. True maybe, but truth bends gently in stories here. One elderly woman nearby has spread out a cloth embroidered with tiny suns. She's selling beads shaped like grains of millet, each with a faint scent of nutmeg. When you approach, she doesn't speak, just looks at you, smiles a little, then places a bead in your palm. You hold it for a moment. She tilts her head. You nod. The transaction has begun. There's a reason people traveled for weeks just to trade here, not just for the goods, but for the rhythm, the calm, the sense that time can be weighed like gold. And yes, for the curious malarias, buzzing nearby snakes are always watching, and you'll probably get scammed at least once. You probably won't survive this market trip without a bout of stomach rebellion, but honestly, worth it. Just past the mosque, the sun filters down in thick golden beams. A child chases a goat through a maze of baskets. A whisper of laughter floats up from a stall selling henna powder and indigo dye. No one is rushing. The market will still be here tomorrow, and the day after that. Because for centuries, this place hasn't just been a crossroads for goods. It's been a meeting place for temperaments. A soft-spoken fusion of trade and trust. Even the architecture seems to lean into it, all rounded edges, soft mud brick walls that melt into one another. No sharp corners, no sudden changes. Just the steady pulse of commerce, the creak of wood under gold, and the slow unfolding of human connection. You step aside as a trader balances an entire woven tray of brass weights on his head. He moves like a reed in water, completely at ease. You wonder if he knows how many figurines he's carrying. Probably. But if you ask, he'll just smile and say, enough. And that's the thing. Enough is an answer here, not a number, a feeling. You sit cross-legged now in a shaded courtyard, where the morning light slants in through a slatted roof. There's a slow breeze, the kind that sways your tunic just slightly and makes the hanging gourds creak like a sleepy door. Around you, spread out like treasures from a miniature kingdom, are dozens, no hundreds, of tiny brass objects. A crocodile, its back arched like a question mark. A kneeling woman with her arms upraised. A bird with a strangely long beak and a slightly confused expression. These are not toys. These are weights. Gold weights. Each one more than a century old. Each one part of a system so sophisticated it could rival the Roman legal code or a Swiss banker's ledger, except with more animals. Here in West Africa, especially among the Akan-speaking peoples to the south and Mande traders to the north, these weights have been used for centuries to measure dust, literal dust, gold dust that is poured out of tiny goatskin pouches, trickled delicately onto copper plates, then weighed against these miniature sculptures. It's not a science, it's a ritual. You take a small turtle-shaped weight and place it on one end of a tiny brass beam scale. On the other side, a careful stream of gold dust begins to pour. Not a flood, just a slow, whispering trickle like sand slipping through an hourglass. And then the balance. When it tips, it doesn't clang, it sighs. But here's the kicker. There was no single standard. Some weights followed Islamic measures. Others used indigenous units like the akwaba or the ta. Merchants knew them all, or at least they knew enough. Historians still argue whether these different systems were deliberately kept ambiguous. Some say it allowed room for negotiation. Others claim it helped local rulers maintain control over external trade. And the figures weren't just functional. They were symbolic. A weight shaped like a stool could suggest authority. A lizard might whisper a proverb. A snake curled in on itself, a quiet warning. Some even say these weights were used to test apprentices. If you know the proverb, you know the price. Which is charming, right up until you realize that failing the test meant losing a day's worth of gold dust. You try to memorize a few. A man hands you a small box filled with paired weights, one shaped like a farmer, the other like a hoe. It's a visual pun, but also a value. You flip it over and feel its smooth underside. Someone polished this every day for decades. Another is shaped like a bird swallowing a frog. The meaning, even the strong have limits. Which seems like a weird reminder when you're trying to buy peppercorns. One weight is unusually heavy. You turn it in your palm and notice a faint glint under the base. Someone's melted extra brass into it, just enough to scam a distracted buyer. It's a subtle trick, and your host chuckles when he sees your face. That one's retired, he says. Too clever for its own good. There's a shelf where the ceremonial weights are kept, used for rituals, not trade. Some are coated with palm oil, others wrapped in silk. One looks like a human face with 3 eyes. You don't ask questions. You just nod respectfully. Some mysteries weigh more than gold. And here's a curious tidbit for you. Many of these weights were passed down like heirlooms. Families would guard their favorite sets, some believing that the older the weight, the more honest the transaction. There were even weights made to resemble ancestors, used only when negotiating dowries or sacred offerings. You can almost hear the voices layered into the brass, every trade, every pause, every decision forged into the shape. You're told the best gold weight users could hear an incorrect balance. Not see, not feel, hear. A soft, almost inaudible clink that meant someone was cheating. Whether that's true or just a good story, well, historians still debate that one too. You practice with a few yourself. Not too bad. Though one time the gold spills too fast and your scale flips like a startled cat. Everyone nearby nods politely but avoids eye contact, the traditional West African way of saying, "Oof, rookie mistake." Eventually, someone brings out a full trading set, a carved wooden box, with compartments for different weights, a scale, and a bundle of fine cloth to lay everything on. It's basically the briefcase of an elite merchant. You touch the velvet lining and realize these aren't just tools. They're status, identity. Portable proof of your honesty and competence. Imagine walking into a market and instead of flashing a business card or handing over a credit card, you slowly unfurl this box. The message is clear: I know the system. I respect the process. I've got a monkey-shaped weight and I know how to use it. You lean back, the sun now warm on your knees, and let yourself drift in the quiet clink of metal. In this space, time slows. Not because nothing is happening, but because everything that does happen matters. Every decision is deliberate. Every pause is filled with meaning. Every brass bird and crooked frog holds more than just ounces, it holds memory. And it's oddly comforting. You're surrounded by things that weigh nothing at all and everything at once. You blink slowly in the dappled light under a sprawling mango tree, your back warm against the trunk, and your legs folded like a half-remembered proverb. In front of you, an elder merchant named Abina adjusts her wide scarf, then resumes the story she's been telling for, oh, who knows how long now. Time's a lazy river here, and you're happily drifting. She has no scales, no ledger, and no visible merchandise. What she does have is a voice like honey left too long in the sun and a stare that sees straight through you. This, she says, is not how much something weighs. This is how much you know. You glance down at your hands. You're holding two identical-looking brass weights, one shaped like a fish, the other like a fish with a tiny missing tail. They look the same, but you're not supposed to measure them. You're supposed to understand them. That's the lesson. Welcome to your first trade apprenticeship. Lesson 1. Never start talking first. You sit in silence. Abina leans back, chews on a stick of licorice root, and watches a goat shuffle past, as if the goat might have an answer. Minutes tick by. A breeze lifts the edge of her wrapper. Then finally she speaks again. Which fish would a truthful man choose? You start to answer, but she raises a hand. No. Think slower. It's not a trick question. It's a test of patience, of thoughtfulness, of cultural fluency. The fish with the missing tail may have been damaged. Or maybe it was made that way, a silent commentary on scarcity. Some say it was a message left for a rival trader. You'll never get the whole fish from me. Others say it just fell off one day and no one had the heart to fix it. Historians still argue about that one, actually. Eventually, you answer. Carefully. The honest one picks the broken fish because it shows they don't hide flaws. Abina gives a small nod. Or maybe the honest one picks the whole fish because they expect nothing less from others. Either way. She shrugs. The answer tells me more than the weight does. And that's the game. You learn through metaphor, through gestures and tales, through watching a pot of millet boil until someone decides to explain why the bubbles rise clockwise. Later, she lets you watch her set up a pretend market. She places down items: 3 dried hibiscus petals, 1 wooden spoon with a crack, and a lump of shea butter no bigger than a walnut. She lays out some gold weights, a turtle, a gourd, a faceless man. Trade me something honest, she says. You place down the spoon. She pauses, picks it up, sniffs it, then gently sets it back and nods. You'll do. A boy your age tries next. He offers all 3 petals at once, along with a shiny stone he'd obviously been saving. Abina smiles, almost sadly. Too eager, she murmurs. Fast traders are loud liars. That becomes a recurring phrase over the next week. Fast traders are loud liars. You repeat it to yourself while chewing roasted plantains, while squinting at weights by firelight, while trying to remember whether the frog weight outranks the hornbill or vice versa. You spend your evenings in the quiet room behind her house, part shrine, part classroom, part napping chamber. The walls are lined with old cowrie strings and scraps of calligraphy on faded parchment. There's 1 lamp, 1 mat, and a deep calming silence that seems to stretch wider each night. Here no one asks if you understand. You just stay still long enough, and if you're lucky, the meaning finds you. There's a story she tells on your 3rd night when a thunderstorm hums softly on the horizon. It's about a trader who tried to cheat by hiding gold inside a gourd. The buyer figured it out, but said nothing. Instead, he returned the next day with a calabash full of termites and a single scorpion, his way of saying, I see your trick, and I will not trade with venom. Did it happen? No one knows. But she finishes the story with the same shrug each time truth always shows its weight. And you start to realize this apprenticeship isn't about memorizing conversions or calculating ounces. It's about reading people. Reading silences. Reading the stories etched into every object, every glance, every pause. One afternoon, she hands you a bundle of cloth. Inside is your first real set of weights. They're worn humble and a little mismatched. One's missing an eye. Another has what might be a snail shell fused to its back. Perfect, she says. They've made mistakes, just like you. And that night, as you lie under a ceiling of woven grass and fireflies, you think about what it means to learn from stillness. To weigh truth not by math, but by memory. A breeze drifts in. You swear it smells faintly of old brass and mango sap. Maybe that's just your imagination, or maybe it's Abina sitting just outside waiting to test you again at dawn. You wake before dawn, breath misting in the cool desert air, and your feet crunch gently over ancient salt-crusted earth. You're no longer in the mango-shaded village of your apprenticeship. You're in Taghaza now, the salt trading post that rises ghost-like from the dunes like something half-remembered from a dream. Everything here is white and silent and impossibly still. The buildings are made entirely of salt blocks walls that shimmer faintly in the early light as if the desert itself is sweating pearls. You walk cautiously. Every step feels like it might echo all the way to the horizon. There are no shop signs, no shouted prices, no calls of come by from merchants. In fact, there are no voices at all. This is the land of silent barter, and your throat tightens a little as you realize the trading here happens without words. A few Tuareg camels groan softly nearby, their packs bulging with gold dust carried up from the forested lands to the south. On the opposite side of the dry basin, a Sahelian caravan has just arrived, bringing slabs of salt hacked from these crystalline mines, salt so pure it could be currency. Here's how it works. One group, let's say the gold traders, arrives first. They quietly set down their offerings. Not in baskets or boxes, but in careful piles. A measured scatter of gold dust. A clump of pepper pods. Perhaps a string of beads or a bolt of dyed cloth. Then they walk away. Far enough to be out of earshot, but close enough to watch. Hours pass, sometimes days. Eventually the salt miners appear. They study the piles. They do not speak. They do not gesture. They simply consider. If they find the trade acceptable, they leave their own good salt blocks, maybe a bit of dried meat or resin, and walk away. If they don't like the deal, they just walk away. Period. No arguing, no haggling. You watch this unfold now, your body almost instinctively still. The desert air seems to demand it. A merchant nearby, face half wrapped in indigo cloth, nudges you gently with a single finger and then taps his lips. Quiet. Historians still argue whether the silence came from mutual respect, language barriers, or fear of offending spirits who supposedly guarded the salt. Some even say it was a clever psychological move. If you can't talk, you can't lie. You can't pressure. You can't manipulate. But you standing here think it's simpler than that. Silence gives space for trust to speak. And it's not like there aren't signals. One merchant tilts a stone subtly on his way out, a sign that he thinks the pile is slightly overpaid. Another scratches the dirt in a spiral, not to change the deal, but to say, "Interesting offer." I'm thinking. Later you witness a standoff. One group walks away twice, unimpressed. The third time, the opposing caravan places a figurine of a seated monkey atop the pile. A joke, a proverb. The deal goes through. No one smiles. But the monkey stays perched, watching the trade like a judge. And yes, there are missteps. One impatient traveler gestures toward the salt, opens his mouth just a little. A breath, a word that almost happens. And instantly the others freeze. He's broken the silence. He's broken the trust. No fight breaks out, but his pile sits untouched for the rest of the day. Maybe even the rest of the season. Your host, a wiry man named Sul with a braided beard and fingernails dyed with henna, later teaches you to read the subtle changes in posture among traders. A tilt of the shoulder means suspicion. A hand behind the back means final offer. A long blink. "We'll try again tomorrow." He tells you trade with your breath, not your mouth. Then he hands you a tiny bag of gold dust and walks away. Your first silent barter is terrifying. You feel like you've walked into a library with no books where everyone somehow already knows the ending. But eventually you get it. You leave your offering. You sit under a ridge of salt for 3 hours. Then return. The pile has changed, slightly. A single salt block has been added. You leave a string of glass beads. Return again. Now a second block. You don't even know what you're trading for anymore. You're just having a conversation through minerals. By sunset, you've acquired 4 salt slabs and 1 dried fig with a perfect spiral inside. You're not sure if it was part of the deal or a gift. Either way, it feels earned. The desert begins to cool. Shadows stretch long and thin, and somewhere deep in that silence you realize this kind of commerce isn't about competition or urgency. It's about dignity, about restraint, about saying I know what I bring and I trust you to meet it. Also, one fringe tale you hear around the fires that night. Some claim the spirits of salt traders still wander the dunes, whispering about unfair trades in the wind. They supposedly haunt those who barter with greed. No proof, of course. But you do notice no one takes more than they need. You wrap yourself in your shawl and lie on a mat of woven palm fronds. The stars blink down at you, silent and impartial. No prices, no tags. just the memory of gold dust falling like a whisper onto salt blocks under the watchful eye of the desert. By the time you reach Jen, it feels like you've entered a painting left out in the sun, everything softened at the edges, glowing gently, swaying just slightly to the rhythm of human breath. The city doesn't roar like others. It rustles, murmurs, clinks and taps, and laughter drift lazily through the air, winding around pillars of mud brick and minarets shaped like fingers pointing sleepily toward the sky. You arrive on a Monday market day, and the town is already buzzing, but not in the modern panicked kind of way. This is market as meditation, and even in the crowd it feels like you're floating. Stalls coil around the base of the great mosque. Yes, that giant sun-dried sandcastle of a building that looks like it was sculpted by dreamers with too much time and too much mud. The walls ripple like old drumbeats spiked with wooden beams that serve both as decoration and practically a way to climb up when repairs are needed. Your feet move slowly across the packed dirt paths, guided more by scent than sight. Peppery ginger-fried yams, wet indigo dye-drying fish, and tangy tamarind. People don't shout prices here, they hum them, literally. You pass a fabric seller who whistles softly as she folds bright wax-dyed cloth into perfect triangles. The tone rises if you seem interested, falls if you wander off. A griot passes by with a stringed ngoni singing tales of traders who once crossed the Sahara with only 3 goats and an unbreakable promise. You catch fragments of words baobab drought loyalty before the melody disappears behind a curtain of market stalls. Here pricing is less about competition and more about rhythm. You notice that the woman selling cola nuts adjusts her prices depending on the season and your mood. If you look hungry, she might lower the price. If you look rushed, she'll double it. Because calm is a sign of wisdom, and rushing is for amateurs. There's a boy selling fish not from a cart, but from a giant gourd floating in a shallow clay basin. He points to one, makes a swooshing sound, and waits. You nod. He lifts the fish gently like he's introducing you to someone special. Payment. You offer a brass weight shaped like a gourd and sprinkle gold dust into his palm. He closes it slowly and grins, then offers you a mango slice for free. You eat it. It tastes like sunlight remembered. Historians still argue whether this type of market culture, so relaxed, so improvisational, was shaped more by Islamic influence or centuries of indigenous tradition. Either way, it's less about fixed value and more about mutual awareness. Not what is this worth, but what feels right between us today. You wander into a quieter corner where women are dyeing cloth in great indigo vats. Their hands are stained purple-black, and their laughter echoes like drum beats in a canyon. One shows you a pattern made by folding cloth just so before dipping it. "We call this one rain when you're not ready," she says with a grin. You buy a strip, even though you weren't planning to. That's how Jenny works. A nearby elder teaches you a proverb. Even the blind man can feel the fair price. You think it's poetic until he tests you blindfolds. He hands you a hunk of shea butter and 2 weights. You fail miserably. Everyone laughs, but the laughter is gentle, not mocking. And then there's the listening bench. No sign marks it. You just notice a row of 3 old men seated under a woven canopy. Eyes closed, hands folded. People approach, sit quietly beside them, then rise and walk away, sometimes leaving behind a calabash of honey or a wrapped parcel. Curious, you try it. You sit. Nothing happens. Minutes pass. Then one of the men opens one eye and says, "The price of millet is not what it was." You nod solemnly, having no idea what it means, and he smiles like you've just passed some kind of test. They call this commerce, but it feels more like poetry in motion. Every movement, every exchange is slow on purpose. A pause here doesn't mean uncertainty, it means consideration, reflection. Even bartering can be peaceful. You try to trade for a small carved stool. The vendor waves your first offer away with a fan. You increase your gold. He shakes his head again. Then you both pause. Breathe. He leans in and asks, "Do you need it, or do you just want to tell a story about it later?" You laugh and he grins. He lowers the price. Because that too is part of the culture, knowing the story you're really trying to buy. There's a fringe tale here too about a spirit called Damafa, who wanders the marketplace invisible, rewarding only those who trade gently, and punishing those who interrupt deals with haste. Children leave cola nuts near the base of the mosque for her. You do too. Can't hurt. As the sun begins to dip, the market glows golden. Even the shadows stretch themselves out like tired cats. You sit on a carved bench legs, aching mango juice, sticky on your fingers, a strip of indigo cloth wrapped around your wrist like a blessing. You didn't buy much today, but you feel heavier somehow, as if the weight of your patience, your listening, your stillness has added value to you. And no one needed to say a word. You step quietly into a sun-dappled courtyard behind an unmarked door in a quiet corner of the city. It smells like iron charcoal and something sweet, maybe hibiscus. Or is it the scent of the old goldsmith himself, humming in his chair, while a pot of metal simmers like porridge over a flickering fire? This isn't a shop. It's a forge. But not the kind with roaring bellows and sparks flying like war. No, this is the forge of a man named Mamadou who sings to his metals the way others sing to sleeping children. He glances up as you enter, doesn't stop humming. Just gestures to a stool and keeps stirring molten gold with a carved wooden stick, the end blackened but somehow still intact. The song he's humming. You don't recognize it, but it loops like a lullaby, slow and circular, the melody sinking into your bones. Here gold is not smelted, it's coaxed. A long rod pokes out from the coals. At the end of it, a small mold shaped like a lion's paw. You watch as Mamadou tips the crucible gold flowing like syrup into the form. Not a single drop spills. The man's hand doesn't even tremble. Some metals listen, he says without looking up. Some argue. Gold is the quiet kind. You blink. It's not a metaphor, not entirely. You're starting to understand that everything here, even the metals, have personalities. Historians still argue whether West African goldsmiths learned their techniques from North African alchemists, Indian traders, or if they developed their own metallurgical magic deep in the forested kingdoms. Mamadou doesn't care. He points to a ring he's working on. This one, it came from the Niger. The river gave it to me. You don't ask what that means. In a corner of the workshop, tiny brass weights lie drying. They're shaped like insects' crescent's teeth. A bowl nearby is filled with charcoal dust and crushed leaves, apparently used to cool the castings slowly so they don't forget what shape they were meant to be. That's not science. That's devotion. You're handed a small mallet. You tap a freshly cast weight 3 times gently. Mamadou nods. Good. That wakes it up. The day stretches. You help sand down a piece shaped like a lizard file, a miniature scale into symmetry, and once you stop everything just to admire how light bounces off a finished set, like a dozen captured suns. It's hypnotic. Mamadou speaks little, but occasionally he says things like, "Gold will tell you who touched it last," or "You can lie with silver, but not with gold." You realize eventually that his forge is as much about memory as it is about metal. Each shape, each line tells a story not written down, not sung out loud, but folded into form. A tiny bird-shaped weight with one clipped wing. He tells you it was made after a trader returned from Gao without his brother. A ring with 9 tiny dots for the 9 jars of salt that built a man's fortune. And then there's the mistake shelf. Weights that didn't come out right, too thick, too thin, warped or cracked. But they aren't melted down. Mamadou keeps them. He says even broken things remember the truth. One particularly odd weight looks like a snake, coiled around a spoon. He shrugs. Someone had a story to tell. Later that evening, you help wrap a finished set of weights in red cloth. Mamadou dips the bundle into a pot of tea. You don't ask why. You just follow suit. The cloth smells faintly of hibiscus and iron. He tells you that each set he makes is slightly off. Not broken, just imperfect. So you must learn balance, not just trust the tools. And that's the lesson, isn't it? That even in the most delicate math, emotion has weight. Intuition has value. Commerce here isn't about perfection. It's about the attempt at harmony. You eat dinner with him on the forge floor, roasted plantains and a stew that tastes mostly like smoke and garlic. You try to thank him, but he just waves a hand. The weights are listening. Be careful what you say. Then he chuckles and throws a grain of salt into the fire. A little joke. Maybe. There's a fringe belief you hear later that truly honest goldsmiths must go a full week without speaking after making a set of ceremonial weights to let the metal forget the heat and remember the truth. Some say it's superstition. Others insist Mamadou hasn't spoken during the rainy season in 20 years. Outside, the moon is high. The weights lie cooling in a bowl of river sand, curled like sleeping animals. You brush the dust from your hands and feel the strange piece of a forge that glows softly, sings quietly, and breathes like a living thing. This isn't manufacturing. This is care cast in brass and truth. You're adrift now, not metaphorically, but literally on a low, flat-bottomed boat gliding across the Niger River. The water is quiet, save for the occasional slap of a fishtail or the creak of a reed mat under shifting baskets. The boatman hums something under his breath that might be a prayer, or maybe just a tune to keep rhythm with the current. This river has carried gold, salt, ivory, and stories for over 1,000 years. But it also carries prices, and not the kind nailed to signs. The kind whispered between boatmen, discussed over cups of sour tamarind brew, and adjusted depending on the tilt of the sun or the mood of the tide. You're headed downstream toward a floating market. Yes, that's right. A floating market, not a permanent port, but a series of drifting barges and tied-together canoes where fishwives, spice traders, and cloth merchants meet like clouds gathering for a slow-moving storm. It starts to appear as the morning mist thins a wide stretch of the river lined with boats side by side tied to tree roots or one another, forming a crooked dock of human exchange. People don't dock. They drift close trade and move on. The current keeps everything politely temporary. You paddle gently toward a canoe where a woman in a deep green head wrap is laying out smoked catfish on woven mats. You nod. She nods. She waits. You wait longer. Finally, she lifts one fish and places it down in front of her very deliberately. That's her offer. Now it's your turn. You retrieve a carved figurine, a fish weight ironically, and a pinch of gold dust in an oiled leaf. You place them gently beside the catfish. The woman raises an eyebrow, then uses a piece of charcoal to nudge your weight slightly to the side. She's not rejecting it. She's fine-tuning the balance. This is commerce as choreography. There are no raised voices, no hurried hand gestures. The market moves like the river, slow, sinuous, insistent. Everything here bends toward patience. Sometimes the boatman says softly behind you, the river decides the price. And it's not just poetic nonsense. The water level changes daily, and with it the availability of fish, herbs, salt, and even the time it takes to transport anything. One merchant explains that if it takes 3 days instead of 2 to get peppers upstream, the price goes up not because of greed, but because the river charged more rent. Historians still argue whether this system of mobile pricing, fluid, seasonal, personal, emerged as a necessity or an ideology. Some say it was practical, dictated by the unpredictability of West African geography. Others believe it was deeply cultural, a built-in check against greed and rigidity. You sit in a neighboring boat as 2 elderly men trade baobab fruit for a small iron cooking pot. The transaction takes 20 minutes and precisely 0 words. At one point, one of the men hums a phrase from a praise song, and the other taps his paddle in time. The deal is sealed with a shared laugh and a palm tap. There's a floating tea vendor further down, his entire business packed into a canoe no wider than a mattress. He brews mint tea with a charcoal stove balanced on bricks. His prices: 3 levels 1, pour 2 pours, or 3. No coins, no weights. He eyes you, guesses where you're from, how tired you look, and chooses a pour. You nod. Fair. You hear a story from another boatman about a legendary pirogue that once carried gold dust in clay jars painted with riddles. The only way to buy from them was to solve the riddle scrawled on the jar before it reached the next bend in the river. True. Probably not. But you want it to be. And then there are the river taxes. Not official ones, but local tolls paid in fish or jokes or well-timed songs. A canoe drifts past with 3 young women singing a tune so catchy a trader 2 boats over tosses them a dried melon just for the joy of hearing it. One girl in a red headscarf teaches you a phrase used to close deals on the water. The river remembers who hurries. You test it out after a tricky exchange involving smoked onions and a pair of ivory dice. It works. The trader grins, touches his chest, and lets you keep an extra fish. A fringe belief emerges too that if you make a dishonest trade on the river, your boat will slowly begin to leak, not dramatically, just enough to remind you. Many traders carry small charms, often shaped like turtles or frogs, to ward off such misfortunes. You find one carved from ebony and shaped like a fish with wide, accusing eyes. You keep it, just in case. As the sun reaches its peak, the floating market thins out. Boats untie. Some paddle slowly upstream, others drift farther down. No formal goodbye. Just nods. Maybe a gesture. The woman in green gives you a second catfish without asking. You've been patient. You've respected the flow. The river laps gently against the hull of your boat, and the breeze carries a low hum, a trader's song about time and tide and pepper that never arrived. You lean back. Let the river carry you. Not all prices are written. Not all trades need witnesses. Sometimes value is just two people understanding one another under an open sky over a moving world. You've returned inland now, your feet coated in red dust again, your lungs full of dry wind and wood smoke. But this time you're in the shade of a palace veranda, a court of commerce unlike any you've seen. This is Kumasi, capital of the old Asante Empire, and the air hums not just with trade, but with protocol. You're no longer in the gentle hush of river markets or the teasing poetry of Jene. Here trade is ceremony not just between merchants, but among chiefs, elders, emissaries, and those careful enough to keep their mouth closed until it's absolutely the right moment to open it. And oh, you'd better bow. At the center of this world sits the Asantehene, the king himself, or rather his court today. He's represented here by a lesser chief still intimidating in robes heavy with gold thread bead necklaces thick enough to stop a spear and sandals made of what you hope is crocodile. His expression is unreadable, his silence utterly commanding. You're here for a commercial audience, a formal negotiation between two parties observed by a linguist, the royal interpreter, a record keeper, and an elder who may or may not be asleep, but you don't dare check. The first thing you learn, nothing happens quickly here. Even saying hello takes half an hour. The linguist speaks for you even when you're sitting right there. You don't speak directly to the chief, that would be like yelling into a thundercloud. The trade item today: a bundle of gold weights from the northern forests, rumored to include a shape never before seen, a mythical animal with the tail of a leopard and the face of a king. You don't know if that's true, but it doesn't matter. What matters is the performance. Your merchant friend Kojo unwraps the cloth bundle in stages, each layer folded and paused over like prayer. Every few moments he pauses for the drummers. Yes, there are drummers to signal his progress. One beat for revealing, two beats for placing a rolling rhythm when an item is considered especially valuable. You glance around. No one else seems surprised. This is how deals are made here with soundtracks. Kojo lays the weights out one by one. Not onto the floor, but onto a silk mat dyed in patterns reserved for nobility. There are animals, people tools, and one shape that looks suspiciously like a mango pit with wings. You lean in slightly. The room stills. Too soon. The linguist taps your shoulder with a fan. You lean back. You've jumped a beat in the invisible choreography of negotiation. Everything here runs on timing. You speak only when spoken to. You move only when the elder coughs. You offer no prices. Not yet. Instead, you wait for a parable. The chief finally speaks softly through the linguist. A man once bought a chicken with a promise. When the chicken laid no eggs, he blamed the sun. Everyone nods. You are now expected to reply with a proverb. Not a fact, not an argument, not a complaint. You dig through your memory. Even the slowest hen lays something eventually. There is a pause. The linguist repeats it. The drummers chuckle. The chief smiles just slightly. You've passed the first test. Historians still argue whether these royal trading customs were purely political theater or genuine attempts to infuse commerce with wisdom. You can't decide. All you know is this room feels like it weighs more than gold. Kojo finally speaks numbers. Slowly. With pauses between each one, like he's letting the syllables settle into the earth. The response from the court is a story, not a counteroffer. About a hunter who found gold in an elephant footprint and used it to buy silence. You have no idea what it means. But the elder finally opens one eye. A sign. The deal is accepted. But the trade doesn't end there. There must be witnesses, not just human, but symbolic. A carved staff is tapped on the floor 3 times. A calabash filled with palm wine is passed around. A feather is dipped into ash and traced along the mat. These are contracts of a kind. And now the gift. Oh yes, you must give something in return beyond the agreed trade. Not a bribe, but a show of honor. A final feather to balance the scale. You offer a horn filled with shea oil. The chief nods. A drumbeat confirms it. Boom. Boom. Later, over roasted ground nuts and a warm cup of millet beer, Kojo tells you that some royal transactions used to take days. Not because of complexity, but because worth needed time to reveal itself. A fringe belief that the Asantehene's stool, the golden one hidden deep in the palace, can actually hum when an unjust trade takes place nearby. No one admits to hearing it, but every trader has at least one dream about it. You stretch your legs in the dusk. The veranda glows with lantern light and the mat is now rolled up, the weights safely returned to their pouch. But something lingers in the air, something dense and charged and silent. Here you don't just trade items, you trade intention. And your silence, your restraint, your willingness to let the drummers finish before you do, that's the real currency. You're farther south now in the Greenbelt, where the forest takes over and the humidity sits on your skin like warm syrup. The roads are narrower here, just red dirt paths, winding between groves of cola and palm trees, where the air smells of fermenting fruit, sweet smoke, and things growing faster than they should. You're walking alongside a caravan, not camels this time, but porters, young and old, balanced like dancers with baskets on their heads and quiet songs in their throats. Their steps fall into a rhythm that's more than just movement. It's the beginning of the cola journey, a trade tradition less concerned with urgency than with relationship. At first glance, this caravan seems loosely organized, no uniforms, no sharp commands. But look closer, and you see the order. The tallest porter always walks in the middle. Elders carry the lead drum. The youngest carry nothing but water and questions. Your job. Walk, listen, and when told, carry a single cola nut in your palm until you reach the village ahead. This nut, about the size of a walnut, marbled red in cream, isn't just a snack. It's an invitation. It signals trade, welcome, memory. It's the kind of object that speaks long before anyone opens their mouth. By the time you arrive, feet dusty and spirits softened by the lull of forest chants, the village has already begun preparing for you. And that's the thing here. Trade is never immediate. First, you must greet. Not with handshakes or receipts, but with posture. You kneel slightly. They nod. Someone hands you water. You take 3 sips and pour the rest on the ground for the ancestors. You're told the ground has memory. You don't question it. The cola nut in your hand is received not as currency, but as context. The elder who takes it inspects it closely, not for weight or flavor, but for cracks. If it's smooth and whole, you're honest. If it's bruised, something's off. They don't accuse. They just hold it up to the sun, let the light slide over it, and then nod. That means you've passed. Only now does the talking begin. The market here is small, just a clearing beneath a massive tree whose roots look like they've been holding up the earth since before language. Traders sit in circles, not rows. Nothing stacked. Everything is spread, visible, touched by the wind. You notice that when someone wishes to buy something, a bowl of dried okra, a carved spindle, they don't just point and pay. They tell a story. A woman points to a bundle of palm kernels and says, "My daughter was born on the morning this fruit fell." She's not bargaining. She's weighing the moment. The seller listens, then replies, "Then take the bundle and leave me a song for your daughter." A song, not gold. And she does. She hums a lullaby and drops a tiny bronze pendant onto the mat. Here exchanges expression. Historians still argue whether this kind of narrative barter was ritualized or spontaneous. Some think it developed from griot storytelling culture, others from lineage-based systems of social credit. Either way, it feels like trading with your whole person. You try it. You want a tiny calabash carved into the shape of a bird. You point, then say, "I once dropped a water pot that sounded like this bird's cry." The seller smiles and replies, "Then may this one carry your next water safely." He accepts your figurine weight in return. A clean swap, no haggling, but now it carries meaning. You're starting to see it here. The value of the thing is just the surface. Underneath, it's about connection, memory, the tone of your voice, and whether your story feels true. Later, you sit in the circle where traders rest. They pass cola nuts between them like fortune cookies, biting into the bitter flesh, nodding as if accepting a challenge. One man spits into the fire and says, "If your trade leaves silence behind, it was fair." You write that one down. There's a fringe tale, too. A local spirit called Ebo the Thin supposedly walks between markets invisible, weighing stories for truth. If he finds one false, he leaves a cracked nut in your next basket. Traders say they've woken to find split cola on their doorstep. Coincidence, maybe. But you notice everyone here tells their stories carefully. As night falls, the forest begins its own trade day, for darkness, warmth, for wind. The fire pit in the market's center glows red, and someone brings out a drum made from a hollowed log and goat hide. They drum not for money, not for attention, but just to keep the circle warm with rhythm. You lie back on a mat, your pouch a little heavier with traded items, a bird-shaped calabash, a piece of cola bark, a spindle wrapped in memory. In this place, nothing is rushed. The trees don't hurry, neither should you. Tomorrow the caravan will move again. Another village, another cola nut. Another trade measured not in price, but in presence. The late afternoon sun drapes the marketplace in a golden haze as you arrive at the village of Timbuktu, a name heavy with legend and shimmering like a mirage on the edge of the Sahara. This is not just any market. It is a hub of intellectual commerce where books and ideas are traded alongside gold and salt. You navigate narrow alleys lined with leather-bound manuscripts, stacked carefully beside baskets of spices and cloth, dyed the deep blue of the indigo plant. The air smells of parchment earth and the faintest hint of oud incense. You feel like you're stepping into a world where knowledge itself carries weight both literal and figurative. A scholar invites you to sit beneath a bent acacia tree, its branches patterned with sunlight and shadow. He opens a dusty manuscript and points to the ornate calligraphy. In Timbuktu, he says softly, words have been the currency of empires. You learn here that knowledge weighed as much as gold. Manuscripts were so precious they were sometimes pledged as collateral in trades. But it's not just the physical books the real treasure was the wisdom they contained, passed orally, debated passionately in courtyards and mosques. Trade here moves slowly, deliberately. Merchants will often negotiate terms by quoting proverbs or reciting poetry. Instead of bargained prices, you hear offers couched in riddles and stories. One merchant holds up a leather satchel filled with saffron and murmurs, "This is the scent of the desert at dawn." Another counters, "But the desert also hides storms." You watch as the exchange unfolds not through numbers, but through metaphor and metaphor alone. Historians still argue whether Timbuktu's market economy was shaped more by Islamic jurisprudence or the traditions of Songhai traders. Either way, commerce here is inseparable from culture, philosophy, and religion. At a stall near the mosque, you see a small brass weight shaped like a lion, its mane carefully detailed. The seller explains it represents strength and courage, qualities every trader must carry. You haggle not in currency, but by sharing a story about a lion you saw on a distant journey. True or not, it seems to satisfy. One intriguing local legend says that the spirit of Sankor University watches over the market, ensuring fairness in all transactions. Traders leave small offerings of incense or dates near the ancient manuscripts as a sign of respect. As dusk falls, the call to prayer rises and mingles with the chatter of merchants. You realize that here in Timbuktu, trade is more than buying and selling. It's a sacred act, a conversation between past and present. The manuscripts close the market quiets, and you feel the weight of centuries settle gently on your shoulders. You find yourself at the edge of a vast plain, where the golden grasses sway like the ocean under a wide blue sky. The sun is low, and the air smells faintly of smoke and freshly turned earth. Here among the nomadic Fulani herders, commerce moves at the pace of cattle, steady, patient, and respectful of the rhythms of nature. You're invited to observe a cattle market, a sprawling, informal gathering, where herders, traders, and buyers meet, not just to exchange animals, but to reaffirm relationships, settle debts, and honor traditions. The cattle themselves seem like participants, not just property. They move calmly among the people, their glossy coats reflecting the late afternoon light. The herders don't just show you the animals, they tell you their stories, where the cow grazed, what storms it weathered, which calf it birthed. Bartering here is less about gold or weights, and more about trust and testimony. You watch as two men negotiate over a prized bull. Instead of haggling over price, they recount shared histories, past favors, and promises of future cooperation. Their words are measured, their gestures minimal but meaningful. You're given a small leather pouch containing a handful of cowrie shells, the traditional currency here. They're passed carefully from hand to hand, each exchange accompanied by blessings and quiet acknowledgments. Historians still debate whether cowrie shells originated in West Africa or were introduced through trade with Asia, but their symbolic power is undeniable. They represent not just money, but connection, continuity, and social fabric. Later you join a communal meal where stories and songs celebrate the cattle trade. An elder sings a haunting melody about a legendary bull that could carry entire villages across rivers. The song speaks of endurance, honor, and the sacred bond between humans and animals. You reflect on the quiet dignity of this commerce, how it resists the haste and noise of modern markets, how it unfolds trade in respect and ritual. There's a local belief whispered among the herders that a lost or stolen cow brings misfortune not only to its owner, but to the entire community, upsetting the balance of nature and society. As such, cattle markets are governed by unwritten codes that prize honesty and fairness above all. As the stars emerge, you lie on your back and watch the sky, feeling the steady pulse of a commerce that honors patience, relationship, and the slow, deliberate beat of life itself. The road you follow now is lined with towering baobabs, their massive trunks gnarled like ancient storytellers' hands. The sun hangs low, casting long shadows that dance gently on the cracked earth. You approach a small village where a group of elders has gathered around a fire, their faces softly illuminated by flickering flames and deep lines of wisdom. Tonight you are invited to witness the final tradition in your journey, a game that is as much a ceremony as a pastime, the West African gold-weighing game known locally as Dunu. The game begins simply. Two players sit opposite each other, a set of brass weights arrayed between them like tiny sculptures of animals, stars, and everyday objects. On one side lies a pile of gold dust, gleaming softly in the firelight. You watch as the players take turns selecting weights and placing them on a wooden balance scale, each carefully matching the weight of gold dust to a known weight. It's a delicate dance of precision and intuition, where every movement carries meaning beyond the numbers. The game isn't just about measuring gold, it's a demonstration of trust, skill, and honor. Players often exchange jokes or riddles between turns, their laughter mingling with the crackling fire. The crowd listens quietly, soaking in the rhythm of play and the subtle negotiation of value. Historians still argue whether the game originated purely as a practical tool for commerce, or if it held deeper social and spiritual significance within the communities. Some suggest it was a way to train young traders in the art of fairness and measurement. Others believe it was a ritual to honor the ancestors and the Earth's wealth. A fringe theory even proposes that certain weight shapes held secret meanings used only by insiders to communicate warnings or agreements covertly during trade. You notice a tiny weight shaped like a crocodile, perhaps a callback to stories you heard earlier about the protective spirits of the river and forest. As the night deepens, the firelight flickers against the faces of the players, the scales and the gold dust weaving a tapestry of light and shadow that feels almost sacred. You join in the laughter, the quiet murmurs, and the shared stories, feeling the weight of tradition settle warmly around you like a soft blanket. Outside, the baobab stands sentinel, watching over the village and its commerce ancient and enduring.